Well, as I say, the main part of the evening now. 3 years since he's been here, and it's 3 years too long, really, but it is great to have him back, really is. Our chairman, our MEP for the North West, Nick Griffin. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, well, as you know, Blackpool has become a focus of attention for nationalism in Britain, and in particular for the problem of Muslim grooming, and behind it, in some ways even bigger than that, the problem of the fact that we've got a state, a ruling class, a police force, a court system, a political elite, and a mass media who do not give a damn about their own people. And that's the real problem, because those Muslim scumbags doing that to those girls would not get away with it in any country which was properly governed by a government which stood up for right, justice and decency for everybody, and particularly for its own people. They're the ones we really blame. And this, as you know, is an issue that we've been talking about for a very, very long time indeed. The British National Party started talking about the grooming issue and the related problems of, that's obviously the problem mainly that girls face and their families. For young lads, as you know, it's racist attacks on our people. And for the whole community, it's heroin, because that also comes from that same community, and our elite has turned a blind eye to that as well. And we've been talking about these things since at least 2001. In 2004, in the run-up to the 2005 general election, I was speaking about this issue in towns such as Keighley in Yorkshire, where it was a far, far bigger problem, affecting far, far more people than has affected certainly Blackpool and many parts of Lancashire. And as you probably know, that ended up with me being in court twice with the ruling elite. They weren't taking on me so much. They weren't even taking on us, the British National Party. That was mainly they were hoping to nail me to the floor so as to frighten everyone out there. It was an attack on the whole British public and their right to speak. That's what was going on. They knew, the British elite knew perfectly well what was happening, and at that point they thought, we can shut it up just by shutting up the English, by shutting up the British. How are we going to do that? We'll pick on a high-profile one, we'll take him down, and the others will be too quiet, too scared to speak. That was the name of the game. As you know, it failed. I was acquitted by 2 different juries, and as a result of that, huge numbers of people over the last few years have felt that they can speak more freely. It really did change things. And that fed into the fact that finally the state has had to act in some cases. So recently we've had the trials in Liverpool from the Rochdale group. And okay, it's good that they sent that gang of perverts, racist perverts, down for more than 70 years. But since it was said in court that some of those girls were raped by hundreds of men, I want to know why hundreds of men weren't in court, why hundreds of them aren't in prison, guaranteed the moment they get out, they're on the first plane home back to their country of origin. So having talked about it, and as a result of talking about it, got it out into the public agenda and made it a real live issue, we've kept on about it. In the last year especially, we've stepped up. The British National Party has had demos all over the place on this issue. We've been in Rochdale outside the first trial there. We've been in Liverpool. We were in Haywood. We've been up in Scotland. We're in Telford, where it was, again, a British National Party local activist team that produced the evidence that the police couldn't get. Because the police had known for years there was a grooming problem, a massive grooming problem in Telford. And they said, the community's closed. We're not getting any information. So our people put out 30,000 leaflets in that town saying, if you've got information, if you can't give it to the police, approach us. Tell us. We'll pass it to the police. And between waking people up a bit and passing information on to the police, our people gave the police the information they needed to act. Which is great in terms of our people, because young girls in Telford are now a lot safer than they were then. But again, what a disgrace that the police, who spend most of their time harassing us, don't act and can only act when we provide the information. We pay our taxes so they go and get the information and bring criminals of whatever race, creed or colour to justice and protect decent people of whatever race, creed or colour. That's the theory, but it doesn't work like that. We have to go out and go through all the brickbats and all the hostility and the harassment of the police And we get so much evidence they can't resist it, and then they finally get off their fat backsides and do something. It's something, but it isn't good enough, is it? We've got to keep on campaigning to make it better. And so the next demonstration that we'll have, as you know, I hope, is on the 9th of June, so it's not far away, here in Blackpool. So I know there's people coming from all over the country. I hope to see you here as well. And this is on a dual issue. The first is outside the new takeaway shop that I'm sure you don't need telling has been opened by the people who were accused of and tried for and let off on a technicality, but the police say they're looking for nobody else, which tells you everything you need to know. And they've been allowed to open another shop without any warning. It's mind-blowing, that. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And if another girl disappears, and Charlene wasn't the only one, if another girl disappears as a result of being groomed in that shop, will those people be satisfied then? Will they have any guilt? I don't think so, actually. I think these people are beyond guilt. They're beyond decency. As long as it's a quiet life on their patch, they're happy enough. Well, we're not going to give them a quiet life on their patch. We're going to keep on and on outside that shop in this town until the police and until the authorities actually do something to get justice for Charlene Downs, justice for Paige Shilvers, and to protect other girls still living. And if any of you perhaps thinking I can't make it or shall I go, please think of this. This is from the Blackpool Gazette. Yesterday, Monday the 28th. Headline: Charlene mum in police order threat. Police have handed a harassment warning notice to the mother of missing schoolgirl Charlene Downs after she distributed leaflets about the two men acquitted of killing her daughter and disposing of her body. But Karen Downs has refused to sign the order, so she would rather put herself in prison than agree to the notice. Well done, that lady. Isn't that fantastic? And there's... Yep, there we are. Richard here, he's got an order as well. I said, when I heard about this, I want one too. Protection from harassment order, 1997. So, you behaved in a manner which potentially amounted to harassment of Al-Batiki and Mohammed Reshefi. Amazing. Yep. So, these two folk here can only go at the risk of being arrested. No one else is under that. I want to see you all there. Because, oh, and another one as well?
That proves his landlord and married.
Oh, yes, yeah. That's the one which proves that he is the landlord of Mario's, the shop. Quite remarkable. All the denials, all the conniving, all the scheming by the council and the police to try to stop us doing anything for justice. But there we are, that's the fact. So, please, please, come on the 9th. We're also campaigning on the 9th. It's part of a beginning of a bigger campaign, nationwide, for a public inquiry. Whenever something goes wrong, when there's ethnics suffer as a result, what's the first thing you hear from the Labour Party, from the Liberals, from the BBC, from everybody? They queue up to demand a public inquiry. When gangs of IRA murderers manage to get themselves shot, they queue up for a public inquiry. But when it's English boys and girls abused and raped and even murdered, and it comes out that the police fouled it up and could have stopped it years ago, shove it under the carpet. Just get rid of it. You know why that happens? You know who's to blame for that? We are. The English are, the British are, because we turn the other cheek, because we're quiet, because we're polite, because we've got in the back of our heads still that we live in the country like it was in the 1950s, in the early 1960s, when basically, apart from poverty, there wasn't anything wrong. There were communities, there was decency. And he didn't need a state crashing around to keep things under control, because we were a homogeneous, boringly white English British nation, and it was all right. But once they multiculturalised us, so we're like the Tower of Babel, at that point, unless a group stands up for itself, nobody else will, because it's the squeaky hinge that gets the oil. And we haven't squeaked. It's time we stopped squeaking and started roaring for the rights of our people. So the demonstration on the 9th of June is only the next stage of this, but it's an important first stage in one respect. It's not being organised by the British National Party. It's being organised by a group called Profam, which stands for Pro-Family. Now we're going. Profam is an independent, non-political organisation standing up for family issues. At present, it's concentrating on grooming, but there are other issues which it'll move on to. Totally separate thing, except it's still the way the state gets things wrong. Nothing to do with race, immigration, religion, but there are hundreds of thousands, particularly of men in this country, who are taken to hell and back because they can't get access to their kids after bitter divorces. It's a scandalous thing, and that needs addressing as well. And Profam will move on and address that, because it's about everything that affects families. But there's nothing that affects families in white working class England at present, like the Muslim problem of grooming, the related problem of race attacks, and the heroin problem from elements of that same community. So that's where Profam is starting. So I'm helping to fund Profam with some of my MEP's allowance, but it is independent. It's not specifically the BNP. That's quite deliberate, to try to bring more people in. Some people do find it perhaps hard to get involved with the BNP. If they've got some distant member of the family that they love who's hooked up with a West Indian or something, they think, well, does that mean I can't be in the BNP? Of course there's a problem. Of course there's not. But they think it is. They think it might be. So it can scare people. People might think, if I go on a BNP demo, might I get into trouble? Might my kids get into trouble at school? Not often, but it happens sometimes. So having it something which is separate and not party political should make it a little bit easier for more people to get involved. And that is what we need. Because this isn't about party politics. This is about our community as a whole learning it's got to stand together and stand up for our rights, because if we don't, nobody else will. So please do come along to that. We've got a demonstration to start with outside the shop. Then after that, we've got a fairly short, sharp meeting where we'll be hearing from a number of speakers, short, sharp speeches, and discussing and working out where this campaign's going to go over the rest of the summer. So very informative, very important, and we do need to see you there. Not least for this reason, that we've got a problem in the nationalist movement as a whole. We've got two tactics which they're not now as effective as they were, for different reasons. The first is that the British National Party for some years has been built on getting sometimes, not always, but sometimes sufficiently stunning election results that it's forced the establishment to sit up and take notice of the issues that make people vote for us. That's been the motor of our growth for nearly a decade. And at present, that motor has spluttered. Not permanently, but it's spluttered because primarily, for most of the BNP's effective political life, the Labour Party was in power. We're primarily a party for working class voters. When the Labour Party's out of power, people think, I'd love to vote for the BNP on this issue, but we've got to get rid of the Tories because of houses, because of jobs, because of spending for our community, and they take the short-term selfish view over the long-term national view, and therefore the votes of every single party which is nationalistically related are down a bit at present. UKIP 2 elections ago in London got over 10% of the vote, 2 MEPs. Last time in London, this time around, they got 4% of the vote. Our vote was bad, but their vote was catastrophically bad for where they were, especially when you consider that Farage and co. are on television all the time. The BBC constantly plug that phony anti-EU party, and it took a hammering because fundamentally, even though they get more Tory votes than us, the working class is thinking I might vote Labour, or the public as a whole, more and more, as you know, have given up on politics. They've given up on voting because they think all politicians are disgusting, useless crooks. And I'm afraid it rubs off on us as well. They think, I'm not going to even think about politics. They've all fouled it up. I'm just going to sit and stay at home. So for the time being, elections have dipped for us, as they have for everybody else. So that's not our motor for growth, and not our motor for making the establishment sit up and take notice about the things that make people want to support us. So we've got to find something new. And effective demonstrations, of the sort I'll talk about in a bit, are one of the ways to do it. To keep us in the headlines, to keep us in people's hearts and their minds, to recruit new people, and to put pressure on the powers that be to do things for our people. The second tactic, which has become a problem, doesn't relate to the British National Party, but to what the EDL have been doing, with big demonstrations. When they started off, they were quite effective. But over the last year, really, the police have learned how to handle them. They're kettled on a car park somewhere. They spend all that money to get somewhere for an afternoon. They're kettled there, they can't meet the public, they can't talk to the public. It's a huge photo opportunity for the police, just to clock every single person and record who's there and who's talking to who. It's a giant intelligence gathering exercise. It's going nowhere, and a lot of those people know it. So that also, we've got a tactic which has hit a brick wall at present, and so have they. So we need to move on. And what we need to move on to is flash demonstrations. Short, sharp, small demonstrations where the opposition can't mobilise, the police can't mobilise, but we get, whoever we are, we get the issues into the headlines. And we give people hope, because that's the biggest reason that at present people aren't voting in the large numbers they were for us. Because it's gone on a long time, we've been pushed back by all sorts of things, all sorts of attacks from all sorts of media and different groups. People think, well, they're not going to win, what's the point? They're tending to lose hope. And the kind of demonstrations that we've been having, they give people hope. Because they see people not sitting down and taking it, but up on their hind legs and fighting and shouting. And that's what they want to see, that there's still fight in the British people. And so no one else will do it if people like us don't deliver it. So that's why these things are so important. And the other thing we need to do is to show that there can be effective local action by small groups. And if you leave it to small groups of people to have effective action, they won't do anything because they don't know what to do. It's for the people who are deeply political to work out tactics which are easily copyable by local community groups. I'll give an example of one in a minute, so that anybody can do it. Once they get the idea, it wouldn't have worked 10 years ago because you couldn't have found out about it on TV. But now most people, especially kids, don't even watch TV. They get it all off the internet. They get it all off Facebook. They get it all off YouTube. So we do it, we film it, we put it out there, and other people will follow suit. I'll give you a couple of examples. One, actually winning. Here again in Blackpool, groups, EDL, infidels, fewer people with us now, organised demonstrations, as you know, against KFC over their use of halal meat. And a tremendous poster appeared in the end in the window after they suffered so much pressure and so many Saturdays of lost trade. Poster in the window, we no longer serve halal meat. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And that can be done. We don't have to rely on the state, on the government, to finally wake up and take action, whether it's for vulnerable young girls or for brutally treated animals. We can actually make a small difference ourselves. It doesn't put everything right, but it means if I, an individual looking at it, take action, if I do something, I make a difference. And that's all people need to know to give them the hope and the backbone to stand up and decide, right, I'm going to make a difference. So that's why it's so important. The other thing that we want to move on to, it's not for everyone, but we're going to be doing it over this summer. We did an experiment in Sheffield a few months back where it was announced, again, a different subject, but related still to family issues. It was announced that kids in a primary school were going to be taught about homosexuality at the age of 4. Utterly sick. Utterly sick. In fact, it's utterly sick that you've got adults teaching children about any form of sex at the age of 4. They're supposed to have a childhood. I don't mind what people do in the privacy of their own homes between adults. It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with the government. It's nothing to do with a political party. Even if you're opposed to something like homosexuality, if you think a state had so much power it could interfere and peer into people's bedrooms, then you would know you had a state which was too powerful. It's not right to have a state that powerful. It's up to people what they do. But we do object to militant gays pushing their homosexual lobby on young children. We do object to the far left trying to build their rainbow coalition and including every homosexual is what they try and do by saying, oh, you're all harassed, you're all victimised and so on, and anyone who objects to children of 4 being taught about sexual practices is some kind of fascist bigot, which is an outrageous piece of bullying. And this bullying was going on in Sheffield, so a small group of our people turned up outside the school and demonstrated, and we got fantastic publicity. I got the best radio I've ever had out of that, when even the BBC at the end of a phone-in had to say, Mr. Griffin, I think this time everybody agreed with you. That's the stuff. But we need to go back to these people, because they can have their bullying, they can push their agenda, their leftist agenda, and they do it constantly, free of harm. The people who risk being persecuted for their political beliefs is people who have beliefs like us. That's what it's been. We need to turn that around. So that every single teacher who, for instance, happily lays on a visit to a mosque for 6 or 7-year-old or 8-year-old kids needs to think, if I do that, I'm going to get a demonstration on my doorstep one Sunday morning. And it's not going to be nice. And my wife or my husband is going to object to it very, very strongly. So perhaps I'll avoid doing it. And that's something, because every time one of these vicious, anti-English, anti-Christian, neo-communist swine do that and put another group of kids through the brainwashing mill, it leaves another group of young girls who are basically defenceless in their heads and in their hearts when some of these people start coming onto them a few years later, because they think, if I object to him, if I suspect him when he's a Muslim, I'm a racist, fascist, Nazi bigot. And they're lovely and it's the religion of peace. So I'll go along with him and I'll accept the hamburger or the can of Coke or the cigarette or the vodka. And by the time it's gone past that, it's too late. Really, there's no place in hell hot enough. Not so much for the groomers, but for the British political elite and people like those teachers who send young girls, twist the minds of young girls and send them out onto the streets having been stripped of the natural protection and instincts that they need to protect themselves and save themselves against that kind of predation. They're the ones that I've really got a beef with, I'll tell you that. And I want them to start living in fear. Not of physical violence, that's not right, it's not moral, it's not necessary, but in fear of trouble for them. Personally, for their families. That's what they need for what they do to all the decent families out there, and that is what we are going to give them. Fear and plenty of it. Now, there's one reason that not that much attention has been paid to the grooming issue, you know, and that's that you see it in the papers, in the Guardian and the Independent and the Times. They all basically say, look, these are girls from broken homes. They say they're vulnerable girls, all the rest of it. You know what they're actually saying? They're saying white trash. That's how they view it. It's because they're working class girls, they don't give a damn. Because it's not their girls in their posh, stuck-up schools. It's not them. They're insulated from this. And that's a core reason why they don't give a damn. Because they don't think that it affects ordinary people. If you speak with a different accent to the plums in the south, they think, well, you're stupid. You keep whippets in the bath and erase coal or something like that. That in the back of their heads. That's how they see it. There's such a huge gulf between our ruling elite and ordinary people. They don't understand that we feel it like they would feel it. They think there's something different. And I would say to the argument, well, this is only white trash. What a disgrace. Because they're actually the most vulnerable kids. Because these are the kids from a community whose natural traditional unity has been smashed up. They haven't got fathers at home. Why haven't they got fathers at home? Because they've globalised our wages and our jobs out of the window so that a man can't keep a family anymore. Can't be done on the ordinary low wages. The mum's got to go out to work as well. They both have. It puts so much pressure on a family that families crumble under the financial pressures. It's one of the biggest reasons for breakups and so on. They've used the mass media to demonise and ridicule the established family unit of one man, one woman, preferably married, being the best way to bring up kids. Which it is. That's not to say that single mums don't do a great job. Lots of them do. But on average, a loving, heterosexual, married couple bring up kids, and statistically, in every way, shape and form, the kids are better off. And yet we've had a systematic war against the institution of marriage, and particularly against white males, and particularly English white males. We've had a systematic cultural war from the very top of institutions like the BBC and so on. And when they sneer and say it's only white trash, they're even more guilty. Because they're saying this is happening to the people that we've deliberately left without community, without organisation, without the ability to stand up for themselves. So they've created that trash. And then they say, oh, it's not our concern then. What a bloody disgrace. So we need to stand up for them. And the other thing that we need to get over to people is it's not just the poor kids down the road, it's decent families too, like the Downses. And it's not just in the centre of Bradford, it's in places like Blackpool. And it's not even just outside or inside kebab shops and all the rest of it. The latest thing, I picked this up from 2-3 different places now, so I'm absolutely sure it's true, and we're always ahead of the game. The latest thing, these groomers are finding life a bit difficult. Because in white working class communities all over the country, it's beginning to filter through to these girls from their older brothers and sisters from their parents and so on, even once or twice from schools, it's beginning to filter through that there is a problem with sexual predation by criminal members of the Muslim community. I'm not saying it's all Muslims, it is not. Some Muslims don't do it, lots of them don't do it, some condemn it. But their community leaders don't condemn it loud enough, and their communities haven't stopped it, which they should do. So to an extent they are all guilty, but they're not all deserving of punishment. They're no more guilty than our ruling elite for turning a blind eye as well. But it's got out enough that there's an issue with a section of that community picking on girls in taxis and in kebab shops. So it's getting harder. Some of the girls are wised up. So no, they turn it down. They don't want the free can of Coke because they know it's not a free can. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Maggie Thatcher is supposed to have said, there's certainly no such thing as a free kebab. Oh no. But it's not working so much anymore. So now, from 3 different places, I've heard, they're going to apple shops. Now, not for you real old folk, for a shop just selling apples. Not even oranges as well. Who goes to a shop only selling apple? We're talking about apples as in computers and all the gadgets, as in the latest smart iPhones and all the rest of it. The place where very well-heeled, very naive, very innocent, very brainwashed middle-class girls go, because there's no point going in unless you've got 100 quid in your pocket, or 200, or 500. That's daddy's money, showing how much he loves the little daughter of 13, 14, 15. She's walking in there all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and there's a gang of these people hanging around with the latest flash phone, saying, "What you love, look at my phone, you want to get one of these?" So she goes and gets one. Well, don't worry, I'll show you how to use it. And then, well, before you go, put your number in. We'll keep in touch. It's a new way of grooming, you see. So it was bags of chips and cans of Coke. This is new. But it's to middle-class targets. In a way, I say, about time too. Because it's about time that the middle and the upper classes started to get some of what the working class in this country have had for so long that they turned a blind eye to. Because they had a duty to stand up for our people. They'd have understood that years ago. The young officers who had a 40-minute lifespan in the First World War. That was the average lifespan of a young officer once he was over the top. Even worse than the privates, because they led their men into action with flat caps and swagger sticks, and the German snipers just took them out. But they did it because they understood that their role, their duty, with the privilege that they had of their decent upbringing and their education, was to lead the nation, was to lead people. And for far too long now, the middle classes and the upper classes, my duty is to make as much money as I can and stuff the rest. Just ignore them. So in a way, I'm quite glad that they're starting to get it in the neck. But then I think as a father, and how would I feel if it was one of my girls like that? So no, I'm not glad. I want that stopped as well. And the only really good thing is that if all the classes of Britain are suffering the same problems at the hands of the same enemies, then it'll help us to stand together. Because if we, the people of this country, stand together, there's never been anything in the world can stop us, and there still isn't. And together we can put it right. And then just finally, to sort of round this up now, just one last thing. I said earlier on, I talk about what can be done at local community level really easily. So we don't even have to call demonstrations together. We just teach people what to do. All over this country, outside of school, you get groomers. You know the sort, you know what's going on. Just waiting for these young girls. So typically they've got a souped-up Subaru Impreza or something like that, all glistening and shiny and big alloy wheels and all the rest of it. And they wind the window down, and they look for the girl, quite often, who's the plainest, the one without friends or whatever. They look for vulnerable girls, and then it all starts all over again. But they're only there because people let them. Because you can complain to the police, and the police do nothing about it. Now, the Muslim community have given us a very good example here of what to do. In various parts of the country, one in Manchester, in London, Balsall Heath, in Birmingham I know as well, particularly, they had a problem with prostitution, red light district, in their area. Actually, it's not their area, it's what used to be a black area they've moved into. They've taken over. But it's got a prostitution problem. And they don't want prostitution in their areas where their kids and their women are seeing it. So they set about stopping it. So how they did it? No violence, no trouble, just a community organising and thinking. So they did things like, they turn up, and because the people who are guilty when there's prostitution, spoiling and dragging down an area, isn't the prostitutes, who are generally poor girls who just need the money to survive. Very often they're on drugs. Their lives are wrecked. The people who are to blame are the rich businessmen coming past in their BMWs and their Mercs and all the rest of it. They're the ones who are really to blame in this case. And the community understood that. So they just turned up with video cameras, just like that. And not videoing the tarts, no. Videoing the cars and the number plates. And taking pictures of the cars and the number plates. And then through a contact of the kind that isn't too hard to get. From the number plate, they get the address and the name of the owner of the car. And then they look them up on the electoral register. And they wrote, not to Mr. Blenkinsop Smythe, but to Mrs. Blenkinsop Smythe, with the photos of what her husband was doing and where he was. Fantastic. And as a result, basically the trade died away. And then they were taking pictures. And they were putting them up on the lampposts and on the trees there as well. Beware of this car, it's a curb crawler, and so on. And the combination of simple tactics like that, they cleaned the whole red light district up in a matter of a few weeks. Now, if you've got a gang of 20-something-year-olds pretending to be 19-year-olds in a Subaru Impreza, it's 4 of them in a car that one of them is very proud of, they're not going to want trouble around that car. And if 3 or 4 people go up and start filming them, and there's 3 or 4 other people nearby, there's only one thing they're going to do. They're going to go. They're going to argue and shout a bit, but they are going to go. If that's done a few times, they'll go somewhere else. To an extent, it's NIMBYism, not in my backyard, go and groom someone else's daughter. But that's what it's going to take in this country. So area by area by area, we make it difficult for them and we wake our own people up. And not only wake them up, but also involve them in simple things they can do to make a difference, to get rid of the hopelessness. And that's really the role of this party over the next few years, probably, actually, in different ways, different subjects, is to pick up on things that are wrong and find ways that we can involve ordinary people to help put them right, or at least make it not quite so bad, in their area. In a word, we need to stop people being victims and make them become activists for themselves, for their families and communities, in small, small ways like that. It's relatively easily done if we just give the lead and encourage people. Don't whine about it. Don't expect the state to do something about it. Don't say, why won't the police do something? The police won't do anything because they're bought and paid for. Because they don't want trouble on their watch. The police won't do anything. Why won't the politicians do something? Of course, they created the bloody mess in the first place. Deliberately. You can't expect them now to start clearing up the mess, because that admits they were wrong in the first place. We've got to get our people in the mindset, I don't ask for permission. I don't not do something that the police say I can't do it. I don't sit down and ask them to do something. If there's a problem, I stand up and I try and get my friends and family and community together, and together we will do something about it. That's our role over the next few years, and I hope very much, I know some of you already, I hope the others will be involved with me and the party and organisations like Profam to make it happen. There's 3 issues, just to come back to, absolutely finally, that we need to be looking at. There's the issue of grooming. Be there on the 9th. Be there on the 9th, please. For Karen, for Charlene, for the Page family. Be there for all the kids at Blackpool and further. Then on the 11th, 2 days later, on the Monday, there is the start of the trial of another gang of Peter Starnies, this time in Burnley. We'll be there, demanding, drawing attention. We're not saying those men are guilty. They're not guilty until they're proven guilty. But we're drawing attention, using the case to draw attention to the fact that there's far, far more like them who should be in court being tried, because if they're not guilty, they'll probably get off. If they're guilty, they'll go down. And the fact that people end up in court for grooming our girls will stop other ones doing it. So we'll be there on the 11th, there on the grooming issue, because grooming is not acceptable. Even the term, it's a sort of PC cant media term. It's what you do to a dog. No, this is far, far worse. This is something that is destroying lives. Not just the murdered ones, the ones who live as well. It's destroying their lives. It's destroying their families. It's destroying their dads and their mums. And it is not acceptable, and we have got to lead the way to stop it. There's the question of the other side of the coin. What happens to the young lads? We had a demonstration in Hyde a few months ago, back to back with one in Hayward on the same day. Hayward, we were there talking about the grooming issue. And in Hyde, we were there talking about racist attacks, again by Muslims. The BBC say Asians. It is not Asians. Sikhs are victims of this as well. Hindus are victims as well as the English. We're all victims at the hands of a criminal element from the Muslim community, and the state and the Muslim community won't do anything to stop it. So when it's young lads, they're being beaten. And it's a murderous, vicious, appalling wave of assaults on young lads. And as everybody knows, everyone knows Stephen Lawrence, but you ask Chris Donald, you ask Gavin Hopley, you ask Richard Everett, you ask those names and people look at you blankly. That's the indication of what's wrong. And again, this is not acceptable. It's not something we can put up with. It's not something we should turn a blind eye to. No, we should get up and campaign and fight and organise people to say that the racial attacks on our young lads are as unacceptable as racial attacks on the young lads of any community. Racist attackers of any race, creed or colour should be in prison, or if they murder someone should hang. And that needs to be got across, and particularly the fact that it's going on in waves against our people, and because we're the only ones standing for our people, we have got to get out there and say this is not acceptable, and to lead the fight against it. And the third point, the taboo, the final taboo, is the connection between this same element, this same religion, or this same imperialist viciousness masquerading as a religion, and heroin. It's grown in Afghanistan. It's imported through Pakistan. It comes through that community, through criminals within that community. Only then does it go out to the black drugs dealers, to the white trash drugs dealers. So all communities, including ours, have got people guilty for the heroin trade, but it starts with that Muslim community. And again, until the elite are prepared to admit it and talk about it, then they can't possibly cure it. It's like trying to cure cancer without mentioning the word, or without using radiotherapy, or without operating. Saying, oh, we'll give you a pill, an aspirin, or we'll put your arm in a sling. That'll cure it. No, it won't. The first thing to deal with cancer is to name it. And what this is needs to be named as well. So please, come out on the 9th, come out on the 11th, get involved, show the British state that we, the British people, will no longer stand being oppressed, abused, second-class citizens in our own countries, and send a message to them, to the abusers. Put it like this if you like. Hey, Peter Stanis, leave our kids alone. Thank you very much.